meaning how they could credit interest were awful. I said, you'd be lucky if you make 3% on average, because that's where we were at an interest rate environment where they were. And they had no other liquidity, right? They had no other money that if they wanted to go, you know, on a bigger vacation or they needed to access it, they would have had to take it from the annuities that they had. And guess what the annuity benefit, one of the annuity benefits they had, that they had no idea that was in there, it had a long-term care benefit. That if they went into a nursing home, they could get an enhanced benefit withdrawal. So they didn't even understand they already had something that would offset the long-term care costs that they might have in the future. So, you know, understanding what you have, that one was a very extreme case. I couldn't believe I was seeing it, that it was all in one. Even if somebody, number one, I would never do that much in an annuity, but even if we were doing, you know, if it was $1 million that we're going in an annuity, chances are you're going to have at least 4 to 5 different contracts, because they're all different, they're all performing different, and they pay different. So you want to have some diversification there as well. So, understanding how they work. And the other thing is, don't be afraid to ask questions. One of my pet peeves is when somebody says, this may be a dumb question. There are no dumb questions, right? You know, I don't do probably what most of you do on a day-to-day basis, and you probably don't do what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I want to make sure that everybody that I work with understands what they have, why they have it, and I don't care if you ask me every year, can you explain this to me again so I understand? Because I know when they left last time, they got most of it, they have a general idea of how it works, but they still, you know, and the good news was, right, they were go on with their lives and enjoy what they were doing, and they forgot about it until they had to come see me again the next time. But don't be afraid to ask questions. You ever see the Charles Schwab commercial? I'm not promoting Charles Schwab, but where they have the couple and they're grilling the babysitter on their credentials, right, and they're going to watch their kids, and they go to the restaurant and they're asking what's in the dish, you know, how do they prepare it, and then they show them sitting in front of their advisor, and the advisor goes, I think you should be in our new fund. They look at each other, they go, okay. Now it's great that maybe they trust him that much, maybe he's that good, but you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Really here. And then there's also variable life insurance, similar things where they have variable investments, but there's also a death benefit that's in there. When you throw the word variable out there, sometimes but there's a lot of variable life insurance out there that's pretty decent, where they have benefits that are guaranteed, and then you have much more upside potential with your cash value. But again, you have allocation alternatives, tax-deferred cash value. You can also, in life insurance, you can take tax-free distributions. Okay. So if any of you have any of those old life insurance policies out there that have accumulated in cash, you may be able to transfer those into more of an income generating type of vehicle for retirement. By the way, if you're looking to do tax-free retirement, tax-free distributions from insurance as a plan, you usually need about 20 years to do that, so depending on how old you are in that work. So asset allocation, diversifying your portfolio, the idea is to maximize your returns based upon the amount of risk that you're taking. Right? Has anybody here seen an efficient frontier analysis of their portfolio? Nope. So the efficient frontier measures the expected return for the amount of risk that you're taking. So if I have, this is what it kind of looks like. And so if I have, and this is your risk line, and this is your return line. And what this does is it measures where the return would be based upon how diversified you are, and you know, obviously how much you have in stocks and bonds, and what's the expected risk. So the expected risk is standard deviation. How much can the portfolio go up and down in any one given year? So what we don't want to have is, you know, a portfolio that maybe has like an 18% standard deviation, but only has a 5% expected return, right? What we want to have is maybe, depending on the case, is maybe we want to have a 10% expected return with maybe only a 5% standard deviation, or how much the portfolio would risk. And then as you mature and as you grow into your portfolio, then you can make decisions on whether or not, do I want to take more risk to increase my returns, or do I want to take less risk and try to maintain the same returns? Because there's a point in time, everybody in here looks pretty young, but there's a point in time where we start to think, well, it's not really for us. It's for the next generation. You know, I have a 26-year-old daughter in 3 days, and you know, I'm concerned about her, but she's good. She's actually very good from a financial perspective. She's responsible. She did get married last year. I'm not a grandfather yet. Hopefully, first I was worried about it, but now I don't care, whatever. You know, when it comes, it comes. I'm sure some of you have probably been through that. But I'm more concerned about the next generation. You know, what are their opportunities? What are they going to have for them? And as you transition into your life, where you may think, well, now it's not so much for us; it's more for the next generation. And how can I preserve that? So, what do you want to do? Maximize, minimize. We have 3 portfolios here with an 8% expected rate of return. We have one with low risk, medium risk, and high risk. I really don't care where you're at on the spectrum from a risk perspective. I'd rather take lower risk and get the same return, right? You know, where are we at from, you know, what's the best performing asset class? You know, if we knew that, this would have been a drive-through. Just would have came through, we would have said, here, go do this, and that would have been it. So we would have been able to just figure it out. But you know, having diversification. There was an article in Investment News magazine in January, February of 2016. You probably read it, right? And what the article was about is it said, if you made more than 5% last year, you should fire your advisor. Does anybody know what the S&P did in 2015? About 13%. And what the gentleman was talking about in the article was that if you made more than 5%, you're not diversified enough. That means you're all invested in U.S. equities. And believe it or not, that was the best place for you to be. Still has been the best place for you to be up until recently. You know, over the last couple of years, international has done very well. So that, you know, if you work in international, you might have missed out on some of that. But having a diversification, because even though since 2008, the U.S. economy has done very well, as far as the stock market is concerned, you know, we all remember when it hasn't done as well, right? And we don't want to be overexposed, because those same people that were making 10 and 12% because they're all invested in U.S. equities, you could have went the other way, right? And you could have lost more. So, time horizon, what are your return objectives? What type of risk tolerance are you going to have? How many of you have an investment policy statement? How many of you have an advisor? So how do you sit down with your advisor and determine how you're going to be invested? What type of risk are you going to take? And I know what it is. When you sign your investment policy, you sign an investment policy statement when you get into a portfolio. But understanding how you're going to be invested, where can you be invested, some of that might not be as important to you. You know, when we do help with some fiduciary planning for qualified plans, you know, that's very important, because not only do you have, as a fiduciary of somebody that's sponsoring that plan, you have the responsibility to make sure that there's a reasonable, diversified portfolio that's available to them, what's going to be the options that are going to be, you know, allowable for them to invest in, and you have a responsibility. But you have a responsibility to yourself to really understand how you're invested and what you're going to be doing moving forward, because, you know, if things go south in Europe, do you want your advisor to be able to move, you know, out of or down or have less in the European stock? If you look back to Peter Lynch, who was the Fidelity manager that managed the Magellan Fund, He has a book out. What do you think he did in 2008 in his personal portfolio? Moved to cash. He's brilliant, right? He knew it was, a lot of people knew it was coming, or saw it coming. This is a question of how bad it was going to be. What do you think he did in his fund? He had to stay invested, because that's not what you hired him to do if you had that fund. You hired him to manage it based upon the investment objectives in the portfolio. So his defensive move was to move the portfolio, move some of the portfolio or majority of the portfolio into utility stocks, right? To sort of try to mitigate, but it still went down. Maybe lost a little bit less. So, you know, having an allocation of how you're going to be invested. You know, again, a lot of this would be addressed in an investment policy statement. If you were going to include, you know, different asset classes as well. You know, here they're showing that, you know, fixed annuity for a portion of the bond portfolio. That's not a guide or a rule. You know, have 20% in there. That's just what they're showing as an example. And what's not showing is cash alternatives, also alternative investments. I don't know if Brian talked about those last week at all, but having, you know, some assets that are not correlated to the traditional types of investments that most of us probably have in our portfolios. You know, if anybody saw, you know, in 2008, there was some billionaires created because they were shorting, you know, subprime. There was a gentleman there was a movie, Christian Bale was the actor that portrayed him, where he was a hedge fund manager, and he actually was not liked very well because he told people they couldn't take their money out when we were going through that downturn, and that's what you can do in that type of fund. It's what's called side pocket. And he made people a ton of money. What do you think they did to him once